Hello and good day, everyone, and welcome back to our Lenten reading through the book of Joshua, part of the Old Testament, what's referred to as the historical genre, reading 3 chapters a day for 8 days, Monday through Thursday, for 2 weeks. Just a brief recap of the previous reading. Transitions from Moses to the character of Joshua, who's preparing the people for a military campaign. The emphasis is going to be on God's victory and not of any individual's victory. However, and Joshua has the people preparing, consecrating themselves. Spies are sent into Jericho, which is going to be the first military campaign. There the spies end up in a brothel, and there is Rahab, that account is given a fair amount of quantity in terms of treatment. She's going to be rescued, and those that are in her home at the moment of invasion, and she becomes part of the lineage of David, and ultimately the lineage of Christ. And then in chapter number 3, Israel was preparing to cross the Jordan. It looked a little bit like the Exodus account, but this is a bookend of the Exodus account. Rather than leaving Egypt, now they're walking into their promised land. And the emphasis was on the Ark of the Covenant, which symbolized the throne and the presence of God. So in chapter number 4, here, this crossing the Jordan River continues to be a very pertinent part of the Hebrew story. They're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They're doing so in a certain orderly fashion that highlights and emphasizes that God being in the center of what's occurring. Their successes are going to be because of God's successes. The one who brought them out of slavery now into the promised land. They're going to, Joshua's going to select 12 men from the 12 tribes, and they're going to pick up 12 stones. This number 12 is very important. I've looked at some yesterday, some brief parallels between Joshua and our gospel material. Joshua, Yeshua's name, is the same as Jesus. Jesus chooses 12 men. One of those, Simon, he names Peter, a rock. On this rock I will build my church. Here, when Joshua is preparing the conquest, here has 12 guys, kind of like Jesus' 12 disciples, and there's going to be a rock, there's going to be a stone here. All of this is part of the continued and ultimate formation of the identity of a group of people. They worked on identity during 40 years of wanderings in a wilderness, and now that they are about to enter into the promised land, they are securing their group identity, and this is what we see in part in this 4th chapter. This continues onward into chapter number 5. Circumcision is going to be reiterated. Circumcision comes in Scripture as a sign of the covenant, when in a patriarchal world, in a world where the covenant through Abraham was given through his children, through seed, in a world where, as all of you have heard me discuss, you perpetuated yourself through your children. That was your legacy, and it was quite important to have children. So the agent of childbearing, in the sense of fertilization and the sexual organ, and in the world of antiquity, they considered the woman just a host for what the male did, and so the sexual organ becomes pertinent theologically. And so here the males are going to be circumcised. Remember that this came first for Abraham and his sons. Then it was reiterated by Moses, and now this is going to be a big deal. They're going into a land that was not theirs. They're going to assert their identity, even though they are a powerful group coming in to launch a campaign. Still, they are a minority group. They're going to assert their unique identity by way of their circumcision. And in ancient Hebrew thinking, if they were not circumcised, then they were not a member of the covenant of God. And then they are going to approach Jericho. And the last verses of this 4th chapter echoes some ideas from Moses, his early call. When there he approached the burning bush and was told to take off of his sandals because he was on holy ground. Here, there's some echoes of that as well. So, in chapter number 6, God's going to make clear that this is his design, his victory over Jericho. It's going to come by way of his order. They're going to start seemingly at the top, in the sense of Jericho is a walled city, well fortified. It's a royal city, and they are going to go and they're going to march around. They're going to march for 6 days. And here we've within this imagery, as the Hebrews do, they view everything that subsequently occurs after Genesis as a form of a new way of creation. Whereas in creation, it was done in 6 days, and then there was a day of rest. Here, this whole setup of the conquering of Jericho is going to be done in terms of these 6 and these 7s. It's like a renewal of creation, a new creation that's being done, an ordering out of chaos, like first creation in Genesis chapter 1. Here God is taking out of the chaotic lands of Canaan, and God is going to start to order it by way of this conquest. And there'll be opportunities as we continue on in our reading to address certain questions that are perhaps premature now, but I think some important things that help us develop our theology. As we've conducted these readings before, I typically give some background and some light commentary and narrative to the readings. Eventually start trying to synthesize some of the ideas, but wait for the ideas to come to us rather than to start seeking out a whole lot of synthesis early on. And by the way, having said that, if you have any questions, send them to me, and I'll discuss it in the videos while keeping it anonymous. So there's the idea of this, that in verse 18, as I prepare to conclude this video, that when they go into the city, they are not supposed to take spoils or loot. That the wealth, the riches, the silver and the gold belong to God and belong to God's treasury. The individuals were not supposed to loot the city in that way and take into personal possession and ownership the goods from that city. That's important as we will go into the subsequent chapters. So they march around the city, they blow the horns and the walls, the symbol of strength, fortitude, and stability, as well as progress of the city. The walls fall down, and therein, it's who can contest that this is God's victory and not merely the victory of the Israelites. And so, with that, I will conclude this video and meet you again tomorrow as we will explore chapters 7, 8, and 9.